into our lesson. And let's talk a little bit about announcements. This next Sunday will be the first Sunday, so it'll be singing inspiration, so remember that. And then the Sunday after that will be Mother's Day. We will be having both services, morning and afternoon service. So please plan for that. And then ladies retreat, you guys are having a meeting on May 12th, right? Okay. What time?
6.
Okay. So here at the church at 6, so May 12th, ladies. And then the ladies retreat will be the 29th through the 31st. So we're less than a month away now. So keep the ladies in our prayers. And then we have VBS June 23rd through the 27th. Start inviting and encouraging, and if you'd like to volunteer, please let the Holcombs know so we can make sure we find some place for everybody. So, any other announcements? All right. Well, if there aren't any other announcements, let's open up with the word of prayer before we get going. Brother Joe, would you just lead some word of prayer?
My Heavenly Father, Lord, as we come to you this evening, Lord, thanking you again for your watching care over us this day. And Lord, now I do pray that you be with all those that prayer has requested full and also the unspoken. Lord, I do pray that you be to the families that have lost their loved one. I pray that you will uplift them. And Lord, I do pray that you be with all of the ones that are traveling. Lord, just watch and care over them and bring them back home safely. And Lord, now I do pray that you be with our pastor as he stands before us to bring the message. And Lord, I do pray that you again be with our pastor this upcoming Sunday. Lord, help him to remember the words. And Lord, we thank you for him and his family. But Lord, most of all, just forgive us where we have failed you. And I ask this in your name. Amen.
Amen. All right. So we've been talking about the old man and the new man. Before I get going, did everyone get an outline?
No.
Did you get one to Grandma? And Rachel, did your mom didn't get one? Not very nice. All right. So it's kind of a different outline, but it's essentially showing you the slides and then giving you some things to write down, or giving you an area to write some things down if you'd like. We're going to, if you look in the back, the very last page, you're going to see a chart that looks like this. And we're going to be kind of going through that chart as we go through this lesson and talking a little bit about this. So, what?
Add to your faith virtue, to virtue knowledge, knowledge temperance, temperance patience, patience godliness, godliness brotherly kindness charity. This is our whole ladies retreat.
I know. I told you I'm going to give you information so you can use it for the ladies retreat. Or you can give me information as we teach this, okay? So we're going to talk a little bit about this the next few weeks and discuss this a little bit. And so, ladies, if you do have anything you want to add, go right ahead. So, I'm all right with that. But, excuse me, we've been talking about old man and new man and what that looks like. We talked a little bit about the old man. And so this has been our focus, or our text verses. It's Ephesians 4:22-24, that you put off concerning the former conversation, the old man, which is corrupt according to the deceitful lusts, and be renewed in the right spirit of your mind, and that ye put on the new man, which after God is created in righteousness and true holiness. Okay? So we've talked about the old man. I've been really wanting to focus a lot on the new man and talking a little bit about what that looks like. How do we change? How do we become that new creature? And what do we need to do as children of God, ultimately allowing Christ to change us? Now, we've already talked about two things. We've talked about putting on some things. Colossians 3:10 through 17 talks a little bit about some things that we can put on. We describe them as like clothes that reflect and show who we are on the inside, or what our job is, or how are we presenting ourselves. We want to present ourselves as children of God, and so we're going to have some certain things that we put on to make that help us look that part, okay? And so we considered some of those things in Colossians. The last few weeks we've talked about what do we think about. We want to think on some things. In Philippians 4, 8, and 9, we find it talks about think on these things. And we looked at those individual things as to what we are to be thinking about. What is our mind focused on? What are we putting into our mind? Because whatever we're putting in is what's going to come out, correct? So, good analogy that I've used a lot is garbage in, garbage out. So, good in, good out. So, we want to make sure whatever information we put in is good information, especially when it comes to Christ. We want to put in those godly things, put in the thoughts and what Christ has. Now, it's not necessarily always, the Bible is always a good thing to be putting in, but there's other things that we can put in. We can look at creation, we can look at other avenues, and we talked a little bit about those things that we look at, those things that we smell, touch, feel. All of those affect what we are putting in, and affect our spirit, or affect our flesh, but also can affect our spirit and how we portray and what we think of, okay? Now, one of the things I want to touch on real quick is that I mentioned this last week. If we want to think on good things, we need to make sure we're putting in good things. If we want to speak about good things, we want to make sure that we are looking at things. Now, one of the things as children of God, we can get so wrapped up into the negative that we forget that there is good. And so we want to focus on the good and focus on what Christ can do and how Christ can change lives. Okay? Now, this next series of lessons that I want to talk about is what are some things that we can claim some things. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, what that means and why I use that thought. The reason behind this is we just got done talking about promises, right? We looked at over 40-something promises that we just kind of scratched the surface, and there's more that we could have looked at, but we kind of scratched the surface on those. We're going to talk a little bit more about those promises, but we're going to really focus in on 8 that really focus on the promises that God has given us, and we'll look at those thoughts as we go through this, okay? So, let's turn to 2 Peter chapter 1. 2 Peter chapter 1. And we're going to start in verse 5, or verse 3. Okay? I don't know where the ladies are starting. Are you starting at verse 3? 5? Okay. I wanted to start at verse 3 because 3 really leads up to to verse 5, 6, 7, and 8. And we're actually going to go all the way through to verse 9. So we're going to focus in on all of that. Okay? So let's start with verse 3. Verse 3 tells us, according as his divine power hath given unto us all things that pertain unto life and godliness, through the knowledge of him that hath called us to glory and virtue. And let's go ahead and read through to verse 9, and we'll come back and talk about it. It says, whereby are given unto us exceeding great and precious promises, that by these ye might be partakers of the divine nature, having escaped the corruption that is in the world through lust. And beside this, give all diligence, add to your faith virtue, and to virtue knowledge, and to knowledge temperance, and to temperance patience, and to patience godliness, and to godliness brotherly kindness, and to brotherly kindness, charity. For if these things be in you and abound, they make you that ye shall neither be barren nor unfruitful in the knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. But he that lacketh these things is blind and cannot see afar off, and hath forgotten that he was purged from his old sin. Okay? Now, let's talk about, today we're probably just going to focus in on verses 3 and 4. We'll probably just look at that and a little bit of verse 5. But I want to focus in on those for just a few minutes. Now, one of the first things he tells us is in verse 3. He says, according as his divine power hath given unto us all things that pertain unto life and godliness. Who is the his?
God.
His divine power. God? Okay? Everyone agree with that? Okay? Who has the ultimate power?
God.
God. Okay? We look at Matthew, and that's 18. I put the parentheses in the wrong spot. But Matthew 28:18 says that Jesus came and spake unto them, saying, all power is given unto me in heaven and earth. Okay? Now, that power was given to him by his Father, right? And so God has given that power, or God has the power. So he says, according as his divine power, God's divine power, that his divine power hath given unto us all things. Now, when he says all things, what does all mean?
All.
Everything.
Everything. Okay? So is there anything left out? Okay? So, if he has divine power and hath given us all things, why do we say no? Think about that. Okay?
Human.
Huh?
Human.
Human? Okay.
It's not what we want.
It's not what we want? Okay. That sounds like a kid. But think about this. According to his divine power, he hath given unto us all things that pertain unto life and godliness. Okay? Now, the word life, I found this interesting. The word life literally just means life. And it comes from the word to live. Okay? Now, does God give us everything we need for physical life?
Yeah.
Spiritual life? Both? Okay? So, God, through his divine power, will give us all the things that we need that pertain. What does the word pertain mean?
Related to, or
Related to, deals with, that can be applied to,
necessary.
that's necessary. Okay? So he can give us everything we need for both spiritual and physical life. We've talked about this before, right? We've talked about how we don't have to worry about stuff. We don't have to be overwhelmed with the cares and the things of this life, but to understand that God is going to give us everything that we need. Now, when he asks, well, we'll talk about this here in a few minutes, okay? So, he gives us everything that we need that pertains unto that will pertain unto life, meaning spiritual and physical, and godliness, okay? Godliness has the idea of respect of God, or piety, or reverent, okay? So God gives us everything we need for life, pertaining to life, and for godliness, for us to live that godly life. So this talks about the spiritual. He's talking about physical and spiritual when you look at both of those, right? these three things through recognizing who provides these items. Because who's going to give them to us? God, right? But we have to be willing to claim those things, right? We have to be willing to take a hold of those things. And he says, here's how you can take a hold of those things. Through the knowledge of him that hath called us to glory and virtue. Okay? Now, let's talk a little bit about who is the called. Before we get to that, who's doing the calling? Who's doing the calling? God. Okay? Anyone else? He's the only one? I like this verse in 1 Peter 2, 9 and 10. I think this is a really good verse to talk about who's calling, and I agree, it's God. But verse 9 says, But ye are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a peculiar people, that ye should show forth the praises of him who hath called you out of darkness into his marvelous light, which in times past were not a people, but are now the people of God, which have not obtained mercy, but now have obtained mercy. Okay? Now, I want to touch on this. That he should show forth his praises of him who hath called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Whose marvelous light are we talking about?
God.
God, or Jesus, right? He's the light of the world, right? Okay? So, God, Jesus has called us out of darkness, okay? And he has brought us into his marvelous light. So, saved individuals, okay? Is it more than just saved? Is it just the saved that are called? Or is there more to it?
Looks like there's more to it.
Okay? Okay? Goes on to say, which in times past were not a people, but are now the people of God, which have not obtained mercy, but now have obtained mercy. Okay? There's some obedience that has to go along with this, right? Just because you're saved doesn't mean that you're going to be following. Jesus called his disciples and said, what are you going to do if you're going to, if he calls them out and says, here's what you're going to do if you're going to follow me. Or, I gave you the answer. If you want to be my disciple, you're going to do what? Follow him, okay? So they had to leave some things and follow Christ, okay? And so as he called them out, he says, if you want to be my disciple, you need to follow me. Now, what's the first step in following Christ? Baptism. Baptism, okay? Once we're saved, we're to be baptized, okay? Is that it?
Become a church member.
Church member, get involved in, and I agree, but I think there's a part of this that we sometimes forget on that church membership. It's not just getting your name on the roll, it is getting involved, okay? Getting involved in a church and being part of that church. Just because your name is on the roll doesn't mean that you're following God, right? So we want to follow, in following him, we're going to be baptized. We're going to be letting him work with us. And we're going to be obedient to him through baptism, through church membership, and getting involved in church. And as we're involved in church, we're going to, I submit to you that there's even a next step to that, is that we're going to allow him to change us, right? We're going to be willing to let him work in our lives according as his divine power hath given unto us pertaining life and earth, through the knowledge of him who hath called us to do what? Glory and virtue. Okay? So who do we want to be give glory to through our lives? godly virtue along with that, okay? So I submit that just because that, yes, baptism is very important. We need to be baptized, we need to get involved. We need to be part of the New Testament church, we need to get involved. But I submit there's a third step into this, that we need to be letting Christ change us into this new creature, so that way we can truly claim the promises, the things that pertain to life and godliness. Our ultimate goal, right, as children of God, is we want to be mature children of God, right? Or do we want to continue to just be children, spiritual children? The Bible does I think the Bible teaches contrary to that, right? That we should want and strive for spiritual maturity, and the only way we can do that is by claiming the things that God has given us to life and godliness. Okay? Is there anything anyone wants to add? Any thoughts?
I think that was well said on who the called are.
Okay? And I think that's one of the things about the called, is many times we just think of saved, and I don't have a problem with it, but saved, baptized, getting in church is part of that. But I think there's a whole nother step involved into this that we've been talking about these past few months and this past year, when we talk about discipleship and we talk about maturity, when we start talking about growing and becoming spiritual adults, spiritual young adults, children, all this as we're growing spiritually. All of that is showing that we want Christ to have an effect in our life, and we're allowing him to change us into what he wants us to be. Because let's go back to what we originally said. We want to get rid of the old man and become a new creature. And being a new creature means letting Christ do something in our life. Okay? Anyone, any other thoughts? Okay? All right, let's go to verse 4. Okay. Now, because he has given us everything for life and godliness, and if we want to do that, we're going to do it through the knowledge of him and getting to know him better. He says, whereby are given unto us exceeding great and precious promises, that by these you might be partakers of the divine nature, having escaped the corruption that is in the world through lust, and beside this give all diligence. We'll talk about that here in a few minutes. Now, because God has given us everything for life and godliness, he has given and made some promises. Okay? We've talked a little bit about some of those promises these past few months, as we've looked at individual promises that we can claim and we can hold on to. Peter is going to reflect on a few other, he's going to reflect on 8. But I want you to consider what he's trying to say. Given us exceeding great and precious promises. That word exceedingly great has the idea that it is very great. Okay? Now, what's something great that you can think about? Anything. Doesn't have to be spiritual or anything. Is having your car working a great thing? Okay? Coffee's a great thing. Okay? Okay? Especially in the morning, right?
Anytime.
Anytime. Okay? What's another great thing? Life? Okay? Life.
The snow-covered mountains.
Snow. Okay.
Sunshine.
Okay. What else is great?
A nice 90-degree day.
Nice 90-degree day. She was so excited, she thought tomorrow was gonna be 90 degrees, and she misread her thing and it said 80. Okay? What else is great? Grandbabies, okay? What, not kids?
Well, they're okay too.
Okay?
Grandbabies are well.
We had ducks show up in our pond, and we thought that was pretty great.
Yeah, Monday morning, Monday we came home and we had two ducks in our pond, that were just kind of hanging out in there, and it was pretty cool to watch, and, especially when Lucy was trying to go after them, and we didn't know they were out there till Chloe was just going frantic in the house, but it was cool, because one of the things that we, right now is their time where they're probably laying eggs and things like that, and our first thought was, please don't. Because we're gonna have to mark it off, we're gonna have to put stuff around it, because we don't want Jade or Chloe to get into any of that stuff. Or not Lucy and Chloe. But luckily they moved on, so. But it was pretty cool, we were taking pictures of that. The reason I bring that up is there's a lot of great things. When we look in the world, we can see great things, okay? Now, what this is talking about is exceeding great. This goes beyond what we can even imagine, okay? When we start talking about the promises of God. He goes on to talk about precious. Now, the word precious, this is what I found interesting. The word precious means valuable, costly, or esteemed. Okay? Now, what's valuable to you today? What's in your safe? Family. Okay? Anyone else?
Time.
Time. Okay. What?
Freedom.
Freedom. Yeah. Very valuable. Precious. Anything else? Start thinking about these things. Very great and precious promises. Can we say God's promises are exceedingly great?
Mm-hmm.
Can we say that His promises are extremely valuable, beyond anything this world could offer us? So, family is important here, how much more valuable is the things of God, right? We look at those promises, and I think sometimes we look at those promises as just, oh yes, this is the promises of God. But aren't they more than just promises? Are they more than just statements that God has said that I will keep these things? These are things that He has made, that He has said that are precious, that are exceedingly great. They're more than just what's in our safe or our families or our time. These are things that pertain. It says that by these things you might be partakers of the divine nature. Okay? That word partaker is an interesting word. It has the idea that we can share in or we can associate. So through these precious, exceedingly great promises, we can share or we can associate with God-like growth. That's what divine nature talks about. So, He's given us everything so that we can share or we can associate with God-like growth. You think God really wants us to be spiritually mature? We talk about how this is our instruction book. We talk about how that it is something that we can use to grow and we can flourish and how we can use this. And I agree, and I think it's a true statement. But one of the things as I was studying this and started thinking about this, we're talking about new creatures. We're talking about spiritual maturity. We're talking about true growth, godly growth, that only can come through the precious and exceedingly great promises that God has given us. Why don't we claim those? Now, it's up to us as we start going through these things. Yeah, we're going to be looking at some building blocks, but it takes our willingness to claim these promises, claim these things that He has given us. Because not only can we share and associate into spiritual growth or godlike growth, it also will help us having to escape the corruption that is in the world through lust. Okay? The word corruption means ruin or decay. Okay? Is there anything worth value in this world? Not in the grand scheme of things. When you compare it to the promises of God, there's not a lot of value.
There's nothing that won't be corrupted.
Right. Guess what? Our car is going to break down. I'm using that. Unfortunately, that's been being used a lot for right now. But it's all, not, our houses are falling apart, right? You have to paint them. You have to do work on them. You have to go through and clean things, and it decays. Our bodies are decaying. Right? They're falling apart. But when we think about it from the standpoint of God, we can escape that and have that divine or that godlike growth by changing our focus, by claiming the promises of God. 1 John 2 and verse 17. I want to read that real quick. It says, "And the world passeth away, and the lust thereof. But he that doeth the will of God," how long does it last? Forever. Isn't eternal life more valuable than anything in this world? I think so. There's a lot of people spending a lot of money on trying to live forever. And unfortunately, you don't have to. It's free.
You mean, fortunately, you don't.
Fortunately, yeah. Fortunately, it's free, okay? All we have to do is claim that free gift. All we have to do is accept Christ as our personal Savior. Once we accept Christ as our personal Savior, what are we doing for Him? He that doeth the will of God, that's what abides forever. That is what's going to last the test of time. That is more valuable than anything else in this world, okay? So, as we go through these things, think about, He's given us, He tells us at the beginning, He tells us, get back over here. He says, "According as His divine power hath given us to all things that pertain unto life and godliness, through the knowledge of Him that has called us to glory. Because of that, He has given us these exceeding great and precious or valuable promises, that by these ye might be partakers of the divine nature." Okay? So keep that in mind as we're going through this. The only thing that holds us back from claiming these promises is not God, it's us. We have to be willing to claim the promises, claim these things that He has said, here, do something with them, and then what you will find is you're going to grow you're gonna have godlike growth, and you're gonna escape the corruption or the ruin or the decay of this world or this flesh through lust. Okay? Anything anyone wants to add? Any thoughts? No one has anything to say? Okay, now, I want to touch on this one thing in verse 5. I've put this last part. It says, and beside this, give all diligence. Anyone know what diligence means?
Speedily. Hastily.
I heard
Care.
care, okay?
When I looked that word up in the concordance, it said speedily, hastily.
Yes. Yep.
And
Now we're getting into the ladies' retreat.
I think of it as with intention,
Okay.
with purpose.
Okay? So, if we're going to give all diligence, all haste, all purpose, all speedily, what does that look like?
Get it done now.
Right? Right? Can we be excited about this stuff?
Yeah.
Or is this just a chore for us? Think about that. I'm being serious about the thought, because many times I think we think about being spiritual growth, we look at it as oh, I guess I gotta, right?
Like it's gonna take years.
It's gonna take, it's a lifelong journey. Yeah, it is a lifelong journey, but there's some of us that are moving at a snail's pace, right? You know, what would happen if we speed up just half of that? How much close, because when we start talking about a sharing or associating of the divine nature or of that spiritual godliness or that godly growth, what are we striving to do? Is this not, we're trying to get closer to God?
Right.
So if we just speed it up half of a snail's pace, gets us there twice as fast, right? But think about it. We want to get closer to God. We want Christ to change us. We want their need, and one of the things I put down is there has to be a desire to want to do this. If there is no desire to claim these promises or do those things to escape the corruption, then just do what you're doing. Okay? Honestly. But if you seriously desire and want to diligently seek Him and grow in your relationship with God, we need to start working on it. We need to truly do this with some haste, with some speed, with a desire to do it. It's all up to us. And I think it comes back to the things that we've talked about already. What have we put on? What have we been thinking about? Because I think, and this is part of the reason why I've done it in the way that I have. Putting on those things that are of God. Thinking about those things. Because I can tell you, if we're not thinking about godly things, I guarantee you your desire is not hastily.
Well, the other thing is, we don't know when we're gonna die, and when I die, I want to have as much done for God as I can.
Right. Right. Very true statement. We all have recognized and seen how life is very short. And so, do you really want your life cut off and you say,
I wasn't done yet.
I wasn't done yet? Or I wish I would have? Because the wish I would have's don't matter anymore. It's too late. Anyone else? do you agree with the thought that our desire has something to do with this diligence? Okay? So keep that in mind this next week. Okay? Actually, next 2 weeks. Next Wednesday will be prayer meeting. But as we go through this, this truly is talking about how we can get closer to God, how that we can spiritually grow in our relationship with Him. Okay? And so we're going to talk about these individual things. And we're going to look at some things. These 8 things that Peter talks about and how that we can grow. Now, I agree. There's stair steps. I think the ladies are using a ladder or talking something similar to that. But they build upon each other. Okay? And so as they build upon each other, we're going to find that as we build these things, we're going to get closer to God and we're going to show Him and we're going to reflect Him even more. Because the ultimate goal as we go through all of this is to share or associate, that you might be able to share or associate in the God-like growth that we can only have through Jesus Christ and letting Him change us. Okay? All right. Any final thoughts or comments?